My name's Dan Smith. I'm Secretary General of International Alert. The key starting point is to recognise that there is a link between climate change and armed conflict, in the sense that climate change, by interacting with other features in socio-political economic makeup of developing countries, increases the risk of armed conflict. Armed conflict also makes it harder to deal with the consequences of climate change for ordinary people. So there is a serious double-headed problem which has to be addressed. I think it's very important to keep in mind that the causation is not necessarily simple. It's not an argument that climate change causes conflict. It's rather that climate change interacts with other issues and problems and increases the risk of conflict. And that interlinkage is one of the key thoughts to keep in mind when designing policy approaches. Because if you have a problem analysis which leaves out some of the interlinkages, then you will necessarily have an incomplete policy. As to policy, I think that it's important to recognize that for the next 3 to 4 decades at least, and probably for much longer, it's going to be important for developing countries, indeed for developed countries as well, to be able to adapt to the impact of climate change. Because climate change, conflict, governance, poverty issues are all linked together, the truth is that if you're doing adaptation, you'll actually find yourself doing other things. And if you're doing other things that you think maybe don't fall into the box marked adaptation, actually you'll find out that you have to adapt them to the consequences of climate change. I think the quickest way to understand this is to say that, broadly speaking, adaptation means adapting development, and it therefore means adapting development assistance. I think the third question to come out of this then is, well, what are we aiming for? And I think the answer is we're aiming for resilience. The qualities that help a community or a society or indeed a government to be resilient in the face of climate change are not very different from the qualities that help it be resilient in the face of conflict risk and other challenges, for example, the effects of global recession. So resilience as a target for development assistance policy, I think, comes into the foreground. Lastly, if you think about the climate conflict risk, what this means is that adaptation really has to be grounded in the needs and the participation of ordinary people. It's got to be built from the bottom up. Of course, the local, though it's essential, is not itself sufficient. It needs a supportive national framework, and it will probably need international resourcing as well. But you begin with the local and you support it with the national and the international levels.